Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Sheedy, president of Atheists for Liberty. Welcome to the Atheists for Liberty YouTube channel. We are continuing our weekly streaming series. We had a bit of a delay over the summer from conferences to reforms to growing infrastructure locally throughout the country and various different municipalities. We've been doing a lot at Atheists for Liberty, but we really appreciate that we still have an audience and that there is still energy to want to keep this streaming series going. It's one of the best things, one of my favorite things I like to do as president, platforming some amazing, amazing people. Not only do we at Atheists for Liberty defend Enlightenment values, but we seek to learn from the greatest minds of the 21st century. We started this series nearly a year ago. We're on episode 11, and nearly every single week now, from now until the end of December, there is going to be an episode nearly every week, either hosted by myself or hosted by somebody else. We want to make sure that we do what we can to provide educational content and entertaining content to all of you. Our member of the week is Brian Gray. Be like Brian and become a member today at atheistsforliberty.org. All donations are tax deductible, and we use these donations to grow our programs and promote our mission. So it is greatly appreciated. We're going to take as well these streams and turn them into clips to make sure we get more content out to each and every one of you, doing our best job that we can. So I want to introduce our guest this evening. So Joseph Ford Cotto, first Baron Cotto, is a former nationally syndicated newspaper columnist. He also is the editor of a book review. In addition to being a nonfiction author, Cotto is the co-host of Cotto Gottfried, an online current affairs program. During 2014, King Kaligi of Rwanda bestowed a hereditary knighthood upon him. It was followed by a barony the next year. Aside from being an enthusiastic student of history, Cotto enjoys adventuring, photography, and music. Joseph Ford Cotto, welcome to the channel.
I am very glad to be here. We've been trying to arrange this for some time, and it really is an honor to speak with you this evening.
We've been going at it, you and I, in Twitter DMs for like over a month now, since we were at Freedom Fest, trying to find a Thursday that worked. Either I was busy or you were busy, and it got in the way of things. We've been in the middle of reforms too, as I said here in the monologue. So we're trying to do the best we can, but I gotta say, the way I found out about you, and I mentioned this to you actually privately, but I want the audience to know,
Sure.
I have been growing Atheists for Liberty since 2020. And in doing so, we've been heavily involved on Twitter. We've been heavily involved in the culture wars. And often, as I always do, I, as the leader and president of AFL, I make rants on Twitter, expressing my frustration and my hopes to how I see the culture war going. And just a few months ago, I started to see a lot of occasional retweets and comments and likes and content coming from people that, in my opinion, thought the exact same way that I did. You know, we have a lot of supporters at AFL, but never have I seen some people think about the future of religion in America, the future of atheism in America, and what exactly needs to be done, like yourself. And there's this other great guy named Secular Right on Twitter, who I retweet his stuff all the time. He's a really awesome guy. I want to get him involved with us and what we do. But it's really you two that have just done an amazing job at rightfully showcasing the exact problem as to what's happening culturally in America and what needs to be done. And so anytime I see good content from you, I go through your Twitter feed, and I always try to do what I can to retweet and promote your content too. And I want to do that today, just like I do for many of the other great guests we've had on the channel. You are definitely one of them. So I want to get into that. Start that off with the first question. You know, you have a book that was recently published. The details, by the way, everybody, is in the description of this video. It's on Amazon. You can go to smile.amazon.com, pick Atheists for Liberty as your choice, and then purchase that book once Mr. Cotto here explains what it is about. We also have links to his other stuff in the description there. But, sir, tell us a bit about your book. What is your book about, Eye for an Eye? And how is it relevant in many ways to what we discuss here on the channel, and as well as its relation to the topic of religion and secularism?
It's relevant to so many things. The title, obviously, is Eye for an Eye. Then the subtitle is A True Story of Life, liberty, murder, and the pursuit of revenge at the birth of America. I don't know why I also got caught in my own words there, discussing the title of my own book, but there it is. And the book is about the failed French Huguenot, which is Protestant settlement of Florida, which is important because this was the first European intended to be permanent civilian settlement in what would become the U.S. And the Huguenots were people who were, I mean, obviously you're talking about the 1560s here, so they weren't libertarians by, the standards of today, but they had certainly pre-libertarian or pseudo-libertarian or quasi-libertarian ideas. They wanted to live in an intentional community where they could be among those who were of like mind, like culture, so on and so forth, while at the same time coexisting with those different from them on the basis of trade and understanding different cultures. So they didn't come to enslave people. They didn't come to convert people. They came to have their own thing and basically use trade as a means of securing favor with those who looked different from them, obviously were of a totally different heritage, spoke very different languages. And it's fascinating that this quasi-libertarian story played out so early, very much at the birth of America, before the United States was anything that anybody had any conception of. Now, what happened to the French Huguenots is that the Spaniards came around. They also laid claim to Florida, and they killed the Huguenots almost totally, but some did escape, and they're able to tell their story. And the Spaniards, unlike the Huguenots, were not interested in liberty of any kind. They were anti-libertarian, I would say, by any standard. They had an absolute sense of their religion, which was an extremely harsh take on Roman Catholicism. They wanted to impose it upon anybody that they met. They did come to enslave people. The Spaniards actually were the ones who started the transatlantic slave trade in what would become the U.S. People talk, and I cover this a lot in the book, people talk a lot about the 1619 Project. The idea is that this all started in Virginia, some sort of coalition among whites to oppress blacks, and this formed the basis of what's now the United States. In reality, it started in the 1560s in Florida, and what's now St. Augustine. It started when St. Augustine was founded, and the Spaniards who brought these slaves over from Africa would mate with the slaves because the American Indians here obviously didn't want to be enslaved. The women had no interest in the Spaniards, so the Spaniards didn't bring their own women, unlike the French, who transported women and children to form a continuation of their Huguenot society. But the Spanish did wind up producing children, which they owned with these slaves. And the slave market of St. Augustine still stands today in the downtown area. I've seen it since I was a child. And if you really want to see where the transatlantic slave blacks started in America, you need to go right there. It's not 1619. It started in 1565. So it's very important for people to know this. And one other thing, in terms of there be some sort of white unity, the Spanish enslaved whites as well as blacks. They enslaved people of any race. They raped.
And not only that, I actually have a question for you here. Sure. in this regard. When I remember that when the United States of America was formed and the Constitution was ratified, I remember shortly after, I keep forgetting the exact year, sometime in the early 19th century, we kept the practice of slavery, of course, until the 1860s, but we stopped importing and exporting African slaves, I think sometime in the early 1800s, both us and the British. And I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was the Spanish that kept the practice going and kept exporting into the New World far after many other European powers and nations stopped the practice.
Spain had lost a lot of its colonies, obviously, by the 1800s. What happened is that in these but Spain obviously kept control of some of its colonies as well. By the 1800s, it was sort of a mixed bag, but its empire was in extreme decline. But Spain did continue the slave trade long after America and Britain abolished it. It was quite something else. Slaves were not freed, for instance, in Puerto Rico until the 1870s. So the Spanish did continue the slave trade, even though, and this is interesting, the Spanish had a very low conception of race, which is to say they did not have any sort of articulated idea as to what white or black or oriental or whatever constituted. They would focus on religion historically. As time went on, they did become more Eurocentric, and the beginning of their empire, which is what I discussed in the book, they had no conception of, as you would hear from the 1619 folks, white unity to oppress minorities. Like I said, they oppressed their fellow whites. They enslaved them. They raped quite a few Huguenot women up in where the Huguenot settlement was in what's now Jacksonville, which is not terribly far north of St. Augustine. This is all along the northeast coast of Florida for people who don't know. So generally speaking, the Spaniards behaved in a terrible manner, but they did not have this idea that you hear about from basically the white man evil narrative of today, that the whites should come together to exploit blacks and use the fruits of their labor. That's a total myth. And it's something that I find terribly destructive, because obviously it's teach people to hate themselves and moreover Western civilization. And dealing in the book with a lot of issues, the matter of personal freedom and also setting the record straight about slavery, these are very, very important things that I go over.
Yeah. It's the narrative of the 1619 Project is something that we at Atheists for Liberty unfortunately focus on a little too much every once in a while on social media, because of, obviously, and anybody who's checked out the channel often will know the claim I'm about to make, this claim that the atheist community was this evil, bigoted, racist movement that existed in the 2000s, which just wasn't blatantly true. And plenty of the people that ended up fracturing and destroying new atheism, especially in 2019, once the narrative of the 1619 Project was starting to be promoted, continuously promoted that endeavor and then used that endeavor to attack us in the process. So it's something that we unfortunately have to get involved in the name of defense as a nonprofit. And it's very unfortunate. We evil racists. But following up from that, so I remember actually watching your promotion of the book, which, by the way, is on Joseph Ford Cotto's channel in the description below. If you guys go into the YouTube description and click that link to YouTube on his channel,
it's Cotto Gottfried, but they'll see it there.
Cotto Gottfried. All the details are in there. You mentioned how you talk heavily about religion. Go into some detail there as to how your book relates to the past, present, and future of Western civilization in that theological context.
Well, a lot of people nowadays would say, we need a religion to unite us, to give us tradition, to give us meaning. Once upon a time in what's now the U.S., we did have a theocracy. That's what I discuss in the book, Spanish Florida, and not just Florida, anywhere else in America that Spain colonized. And the way it worked in this quote unquote era of good feelings, or the good old days, was that if people did not believe whatever the party line on religion was at any given point in time, they would at best, at very best, unlikely to be this good, get socially ostracized, or at worst die in some particularly gruesome fashion. And a lot of folks don't seem to understand that what caused disputes among Europeans, both in Europe and in the New World, obviously the New World dispute is dealt with here, as is the European dispute, because the Huguenots came out of the Reformation in Europe, in which whites were at each other's throat over religion. But what happened during the age of religious maximalism, that's probably a good way of putting it, is that people would go after each other because you don't believe in Jesus the right way, you don't believe in the Trinity the right way, blah, blah, blah. And folks who had absolutely no reason to be at each other's throats literally tried to behead each other. So what is produced by a very religious society is a series of very avoidable problems. Now, I know there is the counter argument that, well, but it also gives people meaning and stability and order, but it really didn't, because there was a lot of instability, a lot of disorder, a lot of confusion and fear that took place during this very religious age. And people want to see how theocracy worked out in what's now the U.S. Eye for an eye, I think, is an excellent, it gives an excellent example of how bad the quote unquote good old days were.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think there are too many people in American politics that, either for the sake of grifting or for the sake of their actual beliefs, which I do respect more, as long as if you actually believe this, are embracing this false narrative that we are a heavily religious, we are a heavily Christian nation. We need to go back to that. That's something that needs to be embraced. You know this from the Twitter rants. So to give background and context, going into the second question. You and I, as we operate in politics online, are very much against the idea of Christian nationalism, or the idea of a Christian nationalist future for America, and in many cases, the American right. We see people in the culture wars, from socially conservatives to think tank employees, making these grifty kind of or weird statements that weren't even said just a few years ago to either appease people or because they genuinely think it's the best solution for America, despite the fact that America has always been a secular and religiously diverse nation. That's why we have survived while countless other Western empires have gone through several different government reiterations because of this massive division. Our religious diversity, which, by the way, helps out Christians the most because they're still the majority of America's population, has benefited from that. But there are people that think we've lost this Christian nationalism that we never really had, and we must be Christian nationalists. It's a term that I've seen woke people and far leftists and people such as that use. And for a long time, I didn't use this term because you'd have plenty of partisan individuals use the term Christian nationalism to just describe anybody that they disagree with. Like woke people would call non woke people white Christian nationalists, for instance.
Oh.
I saw it just now in a promotional email by a think tank today, and it's very unfortunate. But now you have people in American politics. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one, for instance. Paul Gosar, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congressman Paul Gosar, Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, for instance, and even Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA use the term Christian nationalist in a positive context, which in my mind goes against the very religiously free foundations and ultimately the very narrative that was pushed in American politics just a few years ago away from this kind of authoritarian dogmatism. I see it as a poison pill that will end up harming the very movements that they claim to have built and created. So do you see this entirely as a grift? Do you see this as a show? Do you see this as a short-term problem that we have to deal with while the rest of America is ultimately still going in a secular direction? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that this whole Christian nationalism thing, it's hard to, other than to say that it's a bad idea. If one wants to see what happened in the age of Christian nationalism, I highly recommend checking out Eye for an Eye. You'll learn quite a bit about it. I would say that when it comes to what's going on today, it's kind of hard, but maybe one could roughly break it down into two camps. You have the grifters who just realize this is something to latch onto online. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I think it's quite likely that Cernovich falls into this. People who just see what the current thing for some folks is, and they sink their claws into it because they know it's a great way to get attention, even if they're not getting money off it. For some people, quite a few people, particularly the age of social media, attention is worth more than money, so they get it. And then for other people, this might be more like your Green. I think she might actually believe this. It's something that they think is a good thing, and they're probably not very deep thinkers. So I mean, it's not surprising that they would come up with this. For people who are grifting off it, I think the motive is obvious. There's not much point in discussing it. For people who are serious about it, I think it's an expression of desperation at America, which has changed into something that they can hardly recognize, and is rapidly changing into something which is utterly unrecognizable. And it's totally understandable that they would not be happy about this. I'm not happy about it, but they rather than trying to deal with the situation proactively, they adopted extremely reactionary pose, which is to say we need to go back to this thing which was never even part of America. You're talking about something basically pre-Enlightenment, and have that be our ruling order. Now, a lot of these folks probably don't even know what the Enlightenment was, but they all the same, they do want to go back to a pre-Enlightenment stage. Even if they can't articulate that, it's what they want all the same. So I think it is desperation for people to take it seriously. Now, the most important thing to bring up here is does this stuff really carry any potency? The answer is no. It's mainly an online thing, which is fueled by a noisy minority of folks in social media. What happens on social media, whether you're talking about the left or the right, is that it attracts extreme voices who otherwise would not have a platform. But when they get together with like minds, they basically create an echo chamber, and the wailings of that chamber are amplified to the point that it sounds like these people have much more support than they actually do. Now, when it comes to these, basically theocrats, I would say that they understand that they're losing, but they figure this is the best way, the ones who take it seriously, not to go down without a fight, to have some chance of renewal. But for people who don't take it seriously, this is just the next thing to either cash in on, or boiling it down to money is overly simplistic, but I would say that they probably just hope to get attention off of it. And I really think with social media, one needs to focus on that, because people say, oh, you're a grifter, you're a this, you're a that. And grifting traditionally has meant scamming. People try to get money that they have no right to on the basis of deception. But when it comes to social media grifting, I don't think most of it has to do with money, really. I think the currency is attention. So people say things they don't believe in to get attention, and to them, that's worth more than a check for, $100,000. So yeah. I really think for a lot of folks, that's what this boils down to.
And it's really annoying to me, because as the president of a nonprofit organization, that one of our programs is to go to national conferences by some of these various political factions, and to make the truthful claim that their arena of politics is gradually going in a more secular direction because of the success of new atheism doing that to mainstream America and to the left. The same is going to gradually happen to these places. And a lot of the counterculture stuff that they've been saying is inherently secular in nature, but they won't admit it because they either want to appease donors and older baby boomers that still have that old mentality, or for some other reason that maybe they think that somehow this growing secular eventual majority won't buy into the truth. And it's something I'm trying to scream from the rooftops. I said on an earlier stream that I think we, as a growing majority, are going to be playing a tug of war against that minority that is losing and is in that phase of desperation. And even though we're eventually going to win, even though the mission of Atheists for Liberty in that area is going to succeed, we're going to be undergoing a lot of stress, a lot of problems, a lot of infiltration ourselves, a war in and of itself, or a lot of battles in and of itself to win that war. But I think we need to be involved in that war now. And I think we have done a bad job, I think, as like anti-woke atheists, I think, of calling out this problem. One thing I'll maybe ask you as well, and I mentioned this on another stream I did recently, is I love in many ways that anti-woke atheists who saw the destruction of the atheist movement, they rightfully went into, say, conservative circles and liberty movement circles. And they saw, oh, I'm not called racist here. Oh, these people believe in Enlightenment values and free speech and civil discourse, and they're against these woke people that act just like theocratic Christians and Muslims. These are great allies. Let's join in this new culture war. And it is part of the branding that Atheists for Liberty has rightfully latched onto as well. We have come into existence onto this claim that we are now in this new amazing culture war where some old enemies are now friends of ours. I think the way, though, that this new culture war erupted was kind of done in a not so good way, though, because I think a lot of atheists that ended up going into these circles and forming the IDW, they ended up not really explaining the secular realities to where this IDW or this new culture war is coming from, this secularism, this secular acceptance direction. And because we didn't call it out, I think it has led to some of these attackers from the far right, these theocratic types, to come on in and say, hey, we're meant to be Christians. And we didn't highlight the atheism. We didn't highlight the secularism. And I think it's led to our own detriment. I think it's led to the internal problem of Christian nationalism in some of these areas that we're facing right now.
The thing of Christian nationalism, it's taken root among some because there's a void and nature abhors a vacuum, so something fills it. And when it comes to people screeching about unpopular ideas on social media, obviously sooner or later there's going to be enough people to fill the void, even if it's only basically for the purpose of the online crowd. I think that what one cannot deny is that, I sound dismissive of the internet saying it's only the online crowd, but it is definitely the internet a primary method of communication for untold millions of people, particularly younger people. And we definitely live in a time where there is a crisis of meaning, where a lot of people don't find any clear path or goal or definition for themselves. So they try to latch onto different things. Wokeness is, an obvious product of our era, where it's this post-Christian ideology where you have the New Testament, a secularized, bastardized version of it, merged with cultural Marxism and postmodernism. Postmodernism probably the bigger of the two influences there, but postmodernism versus cultural Marxism, although both are in wokeism. I would say, though, that the fundamentally Christian nature of wokeism is something which is the base of the soup, if one will. And I think that wokeism has found such popularity because we live in such a secular time, and a lot of people just need something to believe in, even if they believe that their rock has a message of the divine, their pet rock. So people believe stupid things. That's my point. Now, when it comes to atheism failing to promote itself clearly, it absolutely has. It's failed to promote itself clearly on the right and on the left. I'll just chat about the left before I get to the right. On the left, what's happened is that the new atheism movement of the 2000s and early 2010s has basically collapsed, and a lot of people have just decided to try to merge a generic non-belief in the supernatural into wokeism, which is a secular theology. There's no two ways about that. It's not even necessarily a secular theology because it weaves its way into many religious movements, most of them obviously Christian ones. I mean, it's obvious why this happens, because it ultimately comes out of Christianity. But yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Love for the religion of peace. Go figure. Anyway, but it's really, really. I mean, why you say that wokeism has a love for the religion of peace, even though Islam is definitely not something that would be comporting with wokeism, unless maybe talking about some really, really liberal spinoff of Sufism or Ahmadism. Anyhow, though, getting back to wokeism in the left. And atheism, which is the most important thing here. The atheists of the left have basically abdicated to wokeism, so now they're an auxiliary of it. And on the right, the atheists basically thought, I think this is my impression, I could be wrong, that, well, we see society secularizing, so the right will naturally secularize, so we don't really have to do much. People just naturally come to our point of view. That certainly would be my perspective. But as it's turned out, there are these people who have started a counter-reformation, if you will, just as there was an actual counter-reformation in the old days. And they have decided to go this pre-Enlightenment route. There aren't many of them, even though their voices are loud. But certainly their presence is known. And I would say that this whole trad cath, ortho bro, trad con, which is very often theocratic thing, boils down to mainly young men. There are some young women, but I would say it's overwhelmingly males between the ages of 18 and 35 who don't have a lot going for them, which is not to say that they're natural born losers. I'm not judging everyone with a broad brush, but they've been let down by society, or whatever passes for society. That is what I'm saying. And they believe that their salvation, literally their salvation, comes through a doctrine, and something can make all their problems go away. Now, this is what the wokeists believe. They believe that if only they do X, Y, and Z to stamp out all the ists and isms that they loathe, they'll get their utopia. Well, it's not surprising that people who were socialized during the age of wokeism believe in basically the same view of humanity as the wokeists. It's just they have a different doctrine of their salvation. So for the Christian nationalists, it's I'm going to believe that this book of contradictory chapters is going to save me from myself. Meanwhile, this thing was written over. It wasn't even. This is where things get interesting, because the Bible was not written starting in the year 1. It was written much later, long after Jesus purportedly existed. But these people obviously don't think about this stuff. But they think that this very, very old book, which came out of the Bronze Age, which contradicts itself, is going to save them. Just as the wokeists believe that this hierarchy of victimhood and oppression, if they just analyze it correctly and do what they need to do to stamp out the oppressors, even becoming oppressors themselves, they'll have salvation. Both of these groups believe that they could somehow overcome their dissatisfaction with life by way of their salvationist ideology. And in a time where there is a crisis of meaning, where there are rapid social, economic, political, demographic, can't overlook that, changes, you get a lot of these salvationist religions. As a matter of fact, that's how Christianity started, as an offshoot of Judaism. In ancient Israel, there was a great deal of political, economic, religious and social discord, and it did boil down to demographics as well, the Jews and the Romans, and you had all of these people who were so angry, and out of this came Christianity, this religion which says it's going to save you. Now we have wokeism, this religion which says it's going to save you. So it's sort of history repeating. My fear is that wokeism will totally supplant Christianity in the West and become a new theology that's basically a self-legitimating ideology for the West during the next several centuries, maybe millennia. I certainly hope that's not the case. Perhaps it won't be, because I think wokeism is just too crazy and self-destructive to even channel itself into something as Christianity did that's of long-term use.
Yeah, hopefully.
When I say long-term use, by the way, I don't mean that Christianity in the long run was something that was this great thing. What I mean is that it was used by people in power to keep order.
Yeah, and a lot of these people, both woke activists and these new kind of Christian nationalists, the Groypers, and plenty of those similar types, they don't realize that this kind of the beliefs that they are upholding could eventually destroy them in the process. We're already starting to see that, no matter how many, Facebook profile pictures you put up, to show your woke solidarity with a certain event, if you do see something wrong, regardless of your race, regardless of where you are on the hierarchy, if you somehow do disobey that, eventually you'll be cast out. The same has actually happened now within these new circles. I'm not going to say who. I'm not going to give any details, because I want to be as careful as possible with how I say this, but on the opposite extreme side, and this is where you point out how, it's between the ages of 18 to 30, or 18 to 35, especially with some of the younger ones. I've heard some reports that you have some children that have gotten fooled into joining these extreme groups because they don't like the inauthenticity of modern politics and certain political movements. They see these extreme movements, and I'll actually agree with them. At least the extreme people are honest in where they actually stand on certain things, and they're not hiding in the name of politics. I'll give those people credit, respect the enemy, and I guess in that regard. But you have some of these kids that end up realizing later on, or shortly after, oh, I made a mistake. I actually want to get a job, or I want to be a good person. I don't want to be a part of this crazy movement anymore. And you have some of these higher ups in these hierarchies actually now reporting those that are trying to leave to the left, actually, to the woke left, actually, which is horrible for these children in many ways. So you have these extremes that claim to come off as compassionate, loving, genuine, doing the exact same authoritarian things, but people won't admit it because, Christianity, you can't criticize the Christian nature of this movement, or you can't criticize the nature of that movement or that community or that endeavor. And it's a filter that I'm glad that we at Atheists for Liberty don't have. We will call out these things when they are present. We will absolutely state the problem. We're not going to, coddle our messaging based on the narrative of one culture war or another culture war, because even though groups like, these Christian nationalist types are in the minority trying to, pull American politics in their direction, they're still going to do a lot of destruction at the end of the day. And we need to be wary about that and careful about that. So I always like how you kind of always go at it when it comes to telling the truth about these things on Twitter.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's obviously I am a non-believer. I don't believe in any supernatural deity. I am, in a technical sense, an atheist. Also, in a technical sense, you say I'm a scientific pantheist, which has nothing to do with theology, even though the name would imply as much. Basically, which holds that energy is the alpha and the omega of existence, can either be created or destroyed. It's an all living thing, so that's the closest thing as we have to a creator. And it's fascinating looking at some branches of physics as they're learning more about this. It could definitely open up new understandings of not just human beings, but how everything functions, how everything's interrelated in the cycle of life. But looking at those of us who don't believe in any supernatural deity, I do understand the criticism of us, which is that we don't offer something to people that they can latch onto. And if on the left, they have basically the secular deity of white man evil and orange man bad is the physical manifestation of this. And on the right, a lot of people just believe in, Jesus, or something else. But on the American right, it's, almost always Jesus. And people will then say on the left or on the right, well, who are you to criticize these folks? Because you don't give them anything to believe in. And that's true, but it's a good thing in an intellectual sense, because if you don't believe that there's any there, why would you give somebody anything to believe in? I mean, you're basically then just lying to them. So more or less, if you're not going to believe in a supernatural deity, you're believing in yourself, which I think is a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, a lot of people lead such, I'm trying to be kind here, such unfulfilled lives that they don't have much to believe in when it comes to who they are as individuals. Now, looking at the emotional situation here, there's no question that we are at a disadvantage, those of us who are non-believers, because people always want to fill their not all people, but a lot of people always want to fill their life with some sort of figure which makes everything sensible, which gives an easy, passionate explanation, a bite-sized one as to why difficult things are the way they are, something that provides total BS, but digestible answers to complex questions. And wokeness and this whole Christianity thing, they certainly have atheism beat when it comes to this on an emotional level.
Yeah. It's whenever I go to these events, these massive conferences, I see the secularism and I see the secularization of the branding everywhere, and everybody knows it. You go to half of these events and you ask some of these people if they believe in God or not. Every single year, the hands rise more and more in saying that they don't. But of course, we can't upset the base, or we can't state the truth. But we don't hide behind any fake branding. We have free thinker on our website because we actually consider ourselves to be free thinkers. While we're a nonprofit that has the word free thinker on our website, we actually believe it. We do offer truth. We do say things that might not be the most politically correct thing either on the left or the right to state, but we're going to state it anyways because we believe in what we're actually trying to do here. And that's why we really want people to support us. So if you're on Facebook, if you are on Twitter, if you are on Instagram, if you're anywhere on social media, follow us at Atheist Liberty, or on Instagram at Atheists for Liberty. We're a growing nonprofit organization that stands for free speech, free thinking, and freedom for all. You can become a member at atheistforliberty.org today. The starting membership is just $12 a year, and you get access to all of our online programming. We're now starting regional meetups around the country for places and states in the United States that don't have non-woke atheist meetup groups. We finally have the resources to start that infrastructure, but we can do more. So for anybody who wants to actually be a part of an organization or an endeavor that doesn't hide behind AstroTurf language and actually believes in what they say, join Atheists for Liberty today. And we're going to continue this great discussion here with Joseph Ford Cotto. Joseph, I really do appreciate you still being on the show and having these amazing discussions. I wanted to get you on really because I do see you as this new breath of fresh air based on a discussion that we're having now that I think needs to be had more. It might not get us the most views on dissident YouTube when we, talk about things that's not simply bashing wokeism all the time. And believe me, we're going to be doing a lot of wokeism bashing here at Atheists for Liberty, but we want to actually be diverse and we actually do want to live up to our mission here. So when it comes to Christianity too, when it comes to Islam, we're not pulling any punches for the sake of political correctness here. We're doing what we genuinely mean to say. And that's why I've loved your Twitter feed. So thank you so much. And I think we're going to have you on the channel a lot more often. So we have.
And you're welcome on Cotto Godfrey. That goes without saying.
I'll take up the offer. So by the way, guys, I might be going on Cotto Gottfried now. So how are you going to find Cotto Gottfried? 2 ways. Okay. The Apple link to Cotto Gottfried is in the description of this video, and the YouTube channel. I don't know what you're going to do later on with the YouTube channel, but still everybody click on that and subscribe. I did the same thing, and I liked the one video that's on the channel promoting the book. It's really good.
Yeah, I'll just explain. The channel has live streams. So if you're subscribed and you have notifications on you'll know when there's a live stream. Then we take the live streams down because YouTube try to figure out what its guidelines are. It's a needless hassle. I mean, they basically make it so you can't understand them, and then they change them, and then they have new applications of what they already said. It's obviously a game they play to try to keep everyone on edge.
Yeah. Absolutely, I understand that concern. It's something that our IT department is having some issues with now. You know, I have some talk with the staff on, you know, what the countdown as to when we're going to get banned on one of the mainstream platforms eventually. But it's why you all have to follow us everywhere, because if we go down on one of them, you'll all be able to still migrate and follow us on the others. It's very important. We're in an actual culture war here, and again, not just a talking point, not just fakeness. So when I read your bio, you know, going into this stream, you know, I mentioned here how you bestowed a hereditary knighthood. You got bestowed a hereditary knighthood. Want to go into a very unfortunate topic. As of today, September 8th, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Britain, she passed away at the age of 96. She was Britain's longest serving monarch, having served since President Harry Truman was in office and Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. When you go from Churchill and Truman to Biden and Boris Johnson and then the new British Prime Minister today, that's quite a long life and quite a long impact on civilization and world affairs. And with you know, the monarchy being in power for centuries in the UK, a nation that has inspired the creation of this one in many aspects, you know, religion in many aspects is involved in that too. So first off, I have two questions to follow up with this. First off, you got to go into your knighthood and you got to go into your relations on that, because I'd love a good explanation on that. And then secondly, of course, funeral arrangements are likely going to be made for the Queen, for the late Queen. You know, I understand the British people are mourning, but there's a lot of tradition that plays into this as the new king gets into power and as Britain proceeds to exist as a nation. How much of a role do you think religion is going to be playing in this? Do you think it's going to have a big impact? Do you think it's just for pomp and circumstance at this point in Britain? And then, of course, go into your background with your knightlyhood.
Well, I'll just say first and foremost, I'm terribly, terribly, terribly sorry about the demise of Queen Elizabeth. She was, Queen of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, but also the Commonwealth realms that still maintain her as head of state. That includes Canada and the Bahamas, among several other places, also Australia and New Zealand, and there are more places. And she was such an outstanding leader. She wasn't a political figure, but a cultural one that's meant to embody the highest values of Englishness, essentially. And what she was able to accomplish to keep her head above the mudslide that is modern so-called Western society, it's just astounding. And so I have nothing but deep respect for her, and I'm terribly, terribly sorry about her death. I've never felt really sad about the death of a U.S. president, but I felt very sorry, tremendously sorry, I still do, about the demise of Queen Elizabeth. I am from Florida, and Florida remained loyal to Great Britain during the American Revolution. So I like to say that she is our rightful head of state, although unfortunately Britain lost Florida after the revolution was ended. It didn't end very well, but it did end. And so now we're stuck with this. So it's also, I should bring up that this is the only American flag I own. I got it when I was a boy in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is where I also became enamored of constitutional monarchy. That's a big point in explaining what I'm about to get into, whether it be what's going to happen in the UK or my own life experiences. But this is the Grand Union flag, in case anybody doesn't know. It was the first flag of the United States. Obviously, it's my favorite. And you don't need to ask why the Union Jack is there, accompanied by the 13 stripes. So anyhow, looking at what's happening in the UK, Charles is already in power. As soon as Elizabeth dies, he comes into power. There's not a moment where there's any how do I put this? There's not a lapse between one reign and another reign. Charles just begins. The funeral arrangements, I think, will be massive. I think there'll probably be people looking on for miles and miles, as well there should be. And I think that religion definitely will play a former role. The Queen was a devout Christian believer. She was the head of the Church of England, and now Charles is, even though I think his belief is nowhere near as intense. So there will be for her, obviously, very profound religious, I wouldn't say fervor, but religious there will be religious happenings. Now, as far as Britain on the whole goes, I don't think that any of the nations of the UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland is obviously the most religious of the four, but even there, I don't think that religion is going to be a huge factor among the people. I think they'll just be and they are, on the whole, extremely sorry to see her gone. The UK is more secular, obviously, than the US is. And I don't think there'll be any sort of resurgence of organized supernatural religion as a result of her death. I think that the sort of religious activism that's going to be big there is what's already big there, and it's also big here and elsewhere in the Western world, and that's wokeness.
Yeah. I think in many ways, Britain is the US in just a few years when it comes to cultural decay, wokeness rising. But I do like the direction that the British people are going in terms of religion, seeing it more as a cultural and ceremonial thing rather than a literal belief. They just got to deal with Islam now. They got to deal with wokeism, and they got to deal with Islam. So
it's not to bring up Islam, but yeah, that's a big deal.
Big deal. And we're going to be getting into a lot more of that on this channel. We'll probably have you on to discuss a few more various things as events unfold. But yes, it's very unfortunate to hear of the Queen's passing. I tweeted out about this earlier. On TikTok, on Instagram, as a Zoomer, whenever I scroll through, I see memes of like the Queen outliving all of us, even when we're like, 90 or 100. She'll be like nearly 200 or something like that. And she'll
would have been nice.
It's the Queen reigned when my parents were born. The Queen reigned when I was born. It's still, even though the UK is not my country, I have never visited the UK yet as of 2022. It is still very weird to see a world without her being alive, without her reign, without her involvement in world affairs. And so it's going to be very interesting from a public policy perspective, from a world government perspective, as to where Britain's place on the world stage is going to be under Charles. And I think it will have culture war and even religion-based implications that even an American organization like Atheists for Liberty will have to discuss.
I think it will. To figure out exactly what they'll be, obviously, is an impossible task, but I think that certainly there will be changes. I will say that when it comes to constitutional monarchy, a good thing about it is that you have the monarch as the physical manifestation of the separation of powers. Here in the U.S., we have the Constitution, which means different things on any given day on the basis of whatever a judge says it means. But in the U.K., you actually have a person to divide powers. The monarch is the ceremonial executive. Obviously, Parliament has legislative authority. Then there's a court system. The Prime Minister, though, is the functional executive because he or she is the head of government, not the head of state. So that's how the constitutional monarchical system works. And I think it's a good system, although in the UK, there are definitely huge problems that are too complicated to get into here. But the United States has huge problems as well. So I'm not going to tell people in the UK that the US has a better system. It doesn't. At the same time, I would not adopt the UK system without some serious reforms to it. Even though I should be patently obvious a constitutional monarchist. I think republics do work when they are small, demographically homogenous, fairly well-to-do. And when I say small, I mean in terms of landmass and population. Switzerland, a tiny, tiny place like San Marino, and a pretty small place like Uruguay. These areas all do quite well because they have these unique characteristics. Although Switzerland is diverse, but they have the canton system in which diversity literally has its own governing jurisdiction, and that works out quite well indeed. In terms of San Marino and Uruguay, I mean, it's very homogenous. So anyhow, looking at what happened in my life, I became a constitutional monarchist when I was still a boy. I did bring up the story of the flag. My parents took me to Williamsburg in the late 1990s. And when I saw the governor's palace there, and when I saw Duke of Gloucester Street and how things looked, is a fairly faithful recreation of the revolutionary period, this little British English really village. I figured this looks so much better than anything I've seen in the US. And I've just been enamored then of why certain places in the US chose to leave. Then I learned that Florida did not choose to leave. It remained loyal to the bitter end. And it was the people here remained loyal because they believed that their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was best secured through the British crown, not a constitutional federal republican system. And I think that they had the right idea because some places that have the best governmental stability, standard of living, cultural, one might say, benefits are these British overseas territories or crown dependencies. And that's what Florida would have been if only, the revolution went differently. But anyway, Florida was given up by Britain back to Spain because Britain no longer had the money after the revolution ended to keep administering Florida. So that is, the history here obviously informs my perspective. Now, talking about my titles, they are real. There's no, it's not a joke. This isn't something that I paid $99 for. Somebody gave me a certificate from Kenya or something like that. Like you see with these online scams. But what happened was that the late King of Rwanda, who reigned in the early 1960s, he was deposed. The United Nations ruled that he was the rightful ruler of Rwanda all the same. But the Belgians, who were de facto administrating Rwanda at the time, they wound up throwing him out all the same. It's a very long story. And he wound up a stateless person. And eventually he got refugee status in the U.S., but he could never become a citizen because in order to become a citizen, he'd have to renounce his title. And it was something that he was given. He inherited the crown because he was a member of the royal family, obviously. And it was something that he had a right to. The UN stated under international law that he had a right to rule. So he was a legitimate monarch, but he was just cast out of power through a rigged referendum. We talk here about voter fraud. I know I can't get into it because of YouTube, but boy, has that been around for a long time, and it certainly hasn't gone anywhere. But anyhow, so he was made stateless, eventually came to the U.S. many years later, lived very humbly, extremely humbly in Washington, D.C., the metro there in Virginia. And he devoted his days to helping out his countrymen and women as much as he could. I discovered his situation in the mid 2010s, and I was fascinated by it. How this guy left Rwanda. He did not loot his treasury. He did not kill his opponents. None of that. He really believed in his people, and he had this right to rule. And he still was trying to help them, even though he was not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and he was living in exile in the D.C. area. So I wrote a series about him, which I don't even think is any longer online. But it was a series that he and his royal house liked so much that he decided to bestow a hereditary knighthood upon me, which I was enthralled by. There's not the title Sir. The Belgians who ruled Rwanda obviously spoke French. So it's Chevalier. That's the French equivalent of Sir. And what happened is that the articles detracted quite a bit of financial attention to the King's Foundation, and they accrued quite a few donations, and people were able to go to school. Rwandans were able to go to school, college as a result of that. And so the next year, the king gave me a barony, a baronial title. And that is a noble title. And I have that today. So I am a legitimate knight and baron. It's not a joke. It's totally valid under international law. And it's the honor of a lifetime and then some. I'm very I couldn't be happier to have these things. I do not ask people to refer to me as Your Excellency, though. That's a great way to get punched in the face, particularly in the US, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I just rather people call me by my first name, in fact. So not even Mr. Cotto. But so I really, that's how this came about. It was something that was, written in the stars is an absurd way of describing it, but it's something that I'm so glad happened, because since I was a boy, as I've said, I've had this interest and loyalty to the ideas of constitutional monarchy. And that's what King Kigeli wanted for his people. He wanted a constitutional monarchy where they had a prime minister, separation of powers, as you see in the UK. But unfortunately, one might say, history had other ideas, and they wound up getting a banana republic. And then we all know what happened in the 1990s with the genocide. It's you draw a direct line from the king getting deposed to the genocide, because the king kept order between different ethnic groups in Rwanda. And needless to say, when you have a republic with a winner-take-all presidential system, these groups form their own political alliances to cast each other out of power, and it gets so bad that they wind up killing each other. So Rwanda is a great example of why constitutional monarchy, in most cases, works better for people than a federal constitutional, even if it's only quote-unquote constitutional, presidential republic does.
Well, Joseph, I thought that atheists can't support order in any sense. We're just a bunch of degenerates that only want anarchy everywhere.
Here's the interesting thing about order, because people think, if you're a monarchist, you have to believe in some deity or some religion, because the king or queen rules as a result of divine appointment. And that is the case, where it's said to be in some countries, but historically, kings and queens simply ruled because they were the leader of the tribe, and it had nothing to do with any theology. It was just that you were from this family that had ruled for a long time. If you inherited the throne, or if you were thought to be qualified for the throne, and a small group of people elected you to it, then you got the throne. And a monarchy which does not rely simply on someone inheriting it, which has a very, very limited, modified aspect to it, I think is a very good idea, because as we see with presidential elections here in the US, not a great idea to have the head of state who changes every 4 years when you have such polarization throughout the country, and especially one party basically that wants to turn the US into what California is, which is a one-party state where the party out of power, the Republicans, have to eat crow, that's a very nice way of putting it, in perpetuity.
I think that is a very good way to end the main questions and get on to the Q&A. So, boy, was this a big discussion. Maybe there have been so many ideas for us to have debates on this channel. Maybe we can have an atheist debate between maybe you and somebody else, monarchy versus constitutional republic, a secular monarchy versus a secular constitutional republic. But that opens the door for a lot more content, which I am obviously on board with. So, Joseph Cotto, I appreciate you getting through these main questions with us. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the channel. We'll get on to some Q&A, comments and questions for a bit, and then we will head out. So I really appreciate all of you tuning in. This has been an amazing episode. I've been looking forward to having Joseph Ford Cotto on the channel for a long time. And if you like what you see here on this channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, because this is going to be a recorded video. We want to please the YouTube algorithm as much as we can. So if you like what you see, give this video a like and hit the notification bell on our channel to see more content. We're going to be coming up with more monologues where I do more things besides just the Thursday streaming series. Our comms team is expanding, and every Thursday we are going to be having new guests on. Next week's guest is going to actually be an interesting one. I'm having my friend Atheism is Unstoppable come on the channel to discuss his censorship and ban from Patreon. as well as a few other interesting topics. So be sure to tune in next week for that. But we're going to get into some questions and comments, and then I'll make more announcements as time goes by. So let's get on into that. So, hey, how you doing? Yes, I'm Tommy. Some people call me Tommy. Speaking of atheism is unstoppable, he calls me Tommy Two-Piece. So nice to have you. That's first comment. Nice to see you rolling. Smoke for secularism, not for me, maybe for you. But Jennifer, nice to see you. Jennifer made that comment around the time when she was talking about your book. Jennifer also bought a copy of your book, the Kindle version.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And by the way, all of you should do the same thing. Go to Amazon.com, or rather smile.amazon.com, choose Atheists for Liberty as the charity of your choice, and then purchase the book, where a small amount of proceeds will actually go towards Atheists for Liberty. Our Amazon Smile link is actually down in the description below as well. So if you want to do that, you want to support us as a nonprofit, besides, of course, becoming a member or donor or supporter or volunteer, do that too. So thank you, Jennifer. Anybody got a time machine? No, but I'll let you know when I do, Jennifer. You, as well as a few other top-notch members and platinum members, will be the first people to get access. Is TARDIS in the shop? I don't know what that means. I don't know at all. Did y'all hear the Queen died? No, I didn't. I didn't hear that the Queen died. Joseph, I don't know if you got that that either. I haven't seen your Twitter feed at all today. No, not at all whatsoever.
I've been tweeting quite a lot about it.
Yeah, I saw. You know, and I understand that the Queen's death did impact you. If you don't mind me admitting this, when we were going through some Twitter DMs, trying to have you as well share this stream, you did say you wanted to take some time to mourn. So I know it did impact you as well. Britain's longest.
Yes, I wanted to keep the Twitter feed a bit clear of anything not Queen Elizabeth related, because it was just too soon. But she was she would have been the world's longest reigning monarch if she'd only lived for a bit longer. But it's a terrible shame that she didn't. And even though she didn't get to be that longest reigning monarch, she still was an immense credit not only to the United Kingdom, but to the Commonwealth, to the Anglosphere, and I would say the whole of the civilized world.
Yeah, she played a massive role in the future of Western civilization. She has met leaders. She became queen when Joseph Stalin was still leader of the Soviet Union. That is the weirdest thing to think. I watched a lot, in between me doing work and preparing for the stream today, I watched a lot of news segments where they went into the history of her reign, and boy, is it interesting. A lot of you can go check that out as well. For anybody who's into politics and current affairs. Another comment, scary that they moved to nationalism. I'm assuming by they meaning the Christian nationalists or people, even some in the conservative movement in the United States, going towards nationalism. For the record, I'm fine with the idea of nationalism, immense pride for one's nation. I consider myself to be a patriot. Some would even call me a nationalist. I prefer to say patriot. I don't have a problem with that. I think you should be proud of your country if your nation does have a good history and has good goals and endeavors. But I don't like this idea of people pushing authoritarian superstition onto people in a secular country, by the way, and thinking that somehow doing that is going to improve the culture war, even though their opponents are doing exactly just that. But it is scary that this strong minority is trying to tug areas of American politics in that direction. It's something that we at Atheists for Liberty are fighting back against. And that's why we need more volunteers and more members. Your money and your time will go towards fighting these movements and these people who want to see us destroyed too. So we have a lot of educating. We have a lot of good things we want to do to save this country, and combating that Christian nationalism is going to be one of the things that we take seriously. So it is scary, but we're not going to let that stop us at all. Jenny mentions as well again that we offer truth. This is when we were discussing why support Atheists for Liberty, or why support the atheists who are not woke and simultaneously not kowtowing to Christianity and to other religious belief systems. Yeah, I think it is worth something. I live only once, and I want to be sure that when I die, I know that I've offered the truth and I have not lied and faked my way into power or to prestige, that I lived a truthful and honest life. That is, the kind of life that I want my descendants and my children to bear as well. But I do actually agree that we need to do more as organized atheists to provide more solutions that religion used to fill. We need to provide secular solutions to give people a sense of meaning. Religion isn't going to be that. The statistics and the demographics is just showing that religion, at least in the United States, is going out the door. You're going to have wokeism on one end, Islam on another end. I don't want to choose either. So,
and I would say that
fight.
wokeism is a religion. It very much is. It's just
Yeah.
not a traditional, organized, supernatural religion.
Yes. And I used to hold the view when I was in the atheist community, when it was healthy at least, that we should only call certain religions a religion. Like we shouldn't call football a religion, but we should call Christianity and Islam a religion. But for the sake of trying to wake people up and educate them about the problems of wokeism, I think it's very wise that we do, because I oppose wokeism now in this culture war, like how I opposed Islam and Christianity in the last one. So it's something that's good. And truth is worth something. It is something that we are going to take, seriously more and more. So just hide that. There we go. Going to keep going here. Really appreciate the comments and questions, everybody. I'm seeing a bunch of stuff that I want to showcase. We got Jenny again. I'm actually more trad than any of you. I consider the abandonment of cat worship to be the ultimate mistake. Well, I'm more of a dog person. So I, just like how I been an atheist for a while now, the hole that, about Christianity once filled is not something that bothers me, Jenny. Okay. We got another comment here. We got a question, actually. As free thinkers, do we believe in free will? I know this is a kind of a gotcha that apologists kind of state in debates. Do you believe in free will, Joseph? Do you believe free will?
I believe in biological determinism to a certain extent. I think that obviously anyone's life is lived as a result of a combination of nature and nurture, internal and external factors. I think that, I know that there's no question that the internal factors make up most of what determines whatever action we take, but there are external factors as well. The whole free will thing, I think it's kind of it's almost basically like I think it's basically like a theological word, free will, to a certain extent, because obviously it comes out of theology, but people do choose to do certain things, but at the same time they have proclivities which make them more oriented toward doing something on the basis of their genetics. Now, how they're socialized also pertains to their ultimate decisions. They can't just say, oh, my genes made me do it. But there's no question that people are nobody, one might say, is free of genetics. I'll put it that way. So we all lean in a certain direction as a result of our biological coding. But people at the end of the day still can choose what they're going to do. So nature and nurture combine to make us who we are. And free will, it's kind of hard to say, because you have these predispositions that make you something more than not. But then at the same time, you have these environmental factors that also, can make you who you are. So one might say we have quasi free will.
Very good answer. We got Max with a question. People live such unfulfilled lives. At least that's a quote he mentioned. Why is this? Why do so many people have this issue? Too few challenges in life, or perhaps a lack of personal responsibility? Any ideas?
Well, it is kind of hard to say. Everybody who has an unfulfilled life has his or her own reasons for doing this, not even a single one. But I think that generally, if one could even speak generally about this, what we see today is that people, due to rapid technological advancements, have never had so many things so easy as they presently do. And when you have all the stuff at your disposal that you don't have to work for or wait for, what happens is that people tend to get bored. They get bored with life itself, and that makes them unfulfilled, needless to say. So even if they're not bored in the sense that, well, they don't have to work, they don't have to do anything, they don't have any obligations to anyone, they still don't have the they don't have the struggles which past generations did, and that's fine. People shouldn't look to put obstacles in their way. But a lot of people throughout history, most people, I would say, have never taken the time to actually set out a philosophy for their own life. So I think traditionally what it was that a lot of people people had these struggles, which generally, particularly in the first world, one no longer has. But at the same time, like people in years gone by, they never really stopped to think about what is my purpose. So if you just have an easier existence than your forebears did, and you don't, but like your forebears, chances are you don't think about, what you're going to do with yourself. You are going to be left more to your own devices, and there's going to be an emptiness, and that emptiness leads people into the realm of how can I put this? It leads them into the realm of Nicole Hannah-Jones or Nick Fuentes. I think at the very opposite ends of the spectrum.
Another good answer. But of course, this is the most important question of the entire stream. All I think ask question: will Joseph join AFL?
I'll just say, I don't join groups as a rule. It's nothing against any group. It's my own personal thing. The only political group that I'm a member of is the Republican Party. And in Florida, you have to register with a party in order to be able to vote in the primary. So that's why I registered. But at the same time, I very strongly support the ideas of Atheists for Liberty. That goes without saying. And I am very glad to throw attention in the group's way. So one might say I'm a fellow traveler of it.
We'll have to just find another way to latch you onto us. We'll figure it out. Funny thing, actually, I'll make this announcement now. Speaking of Florida, there's a lot of things that we're going to be doing in Florida. For instance, the next national event that we're going to be at, that we're going to have a booth at and educate people at and normalize atheism at, is going to be at LibertyCon 2022, which is going to be taking place on October 14th and 15th in Miami. So we're going to be there. We're going to have a booth. We have a larger presence at these conventions and events every year. So if anybody watching, you're in the Miami area or in the state of Florida, or you just want to stop by LibertyCon, or you're a student, because Students for Liberty is actually the host of that event, come down to Miami and hang out with us. We're going to have a happy hour. We're going to have a booth there. We're going to have a lot of cool things happening there. So if you're in Florida, if you're in Miami, you have to see us. You have to see us, and you have to go to our events. Be there. LibertyCon 2022. It's going to be a lot of fun.
If I may suggest, I don't know where it's being held in Miami,
Oh,
okay. That's to say that's the one on Brickell.
I think so. I don't want to say that for certain, but I'm going to assume that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The one I should have said the one in Brickell, but yeah, it's in Brickell for those who don't know. There's what used to be, or now old downtown Miami to the north, and then Brickell's the new, where you see these big skyscrapers to the south. But Miami is an interesting place, and obviously the Brickell neighborhood, the main thoroughfare is called Brickell. So anyhow, but I know it reasonably well. I've been going there since I was a boy. I was just in Miami in July, and I would recommend that if anyone's going to spend time in Miami, don't waste a lot of time with South Beach or even Miami Beach. Bal Harbour it's a very quiet, nice place, and it's on Miami Beach Island at the northern tip of it, but 110% worth your time. It's in sort of it's in an urbanized atmosphere. It's within sight of downtown Miami. I mean, you can see the skyline from the hotels of Bal Harbour, but it feels almost like you're in a little resort house. Kind of hard to describe, but I recommend people check it out.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of sightseeing. I'm actually coming in 2 days early. So I'm going to be flying in on the 12th, and then on the 13th, by the way, I'll advertise this too. People for Liberty. It's another Liberty organization. They're hosting a Miami kind of boat or yacht get-together fundraising event, but it's really cool. I'm going to be going there as well, and a lot of people on the Atheists for Liberty team will be there too. So if you're in Miami and you want to see us for a few days and hang out with the team, go check us out. See us at LibertyCon, and if anybody has any interest in going to that People for Liberty event, contact us and we'll send you the information, because I know People for Liberty is trying to promote that event, and we will help our friends in doing just that. So good question though. Good question. I got to say that I am proud to probably state this. I'm assuming you'll agree. You're basically, I think, going to be a friend of this organization very much. So I already see you as a regular that I'm going to have to bring on the channel to do some stuff with. Just based on my Twitter feed. You and Secular Right, you guys are like extremely reliable. Very much so. So I not just on Twitter am I going to need you. I'm probably going to need you on YouTube too. So
That's
I'll do the
fine.
same for you though. We'll tag team each other. It'll be cool. Frank asks, I've heard you have a mild obsession with what some call American royalty. Considering that the British Queen passed away today, do you have any thoughts about how her death will affect geopolitics?
Uh, it depends on what means by American royalty. Whatever would pass for royalty today in America, I'm not a fan of. But once to talk about the concept of monarchy as it's played out in what's now the U.S. as well as the world, I'm definitely a supporter of the constitutional variant of that. That be within reason. Obviously, there are different types of constitutional monarchy, and some of them wind up being not so good. But I have my own take as to what constitutes the best form of monarchical governments. And anyhow, though, getting away from the technicals, I even forgot what the question was. My apologies.
I can pull it back up actually.
Thank you.
1 second.
Now I see. Yeah,
on how her death will affect geopolitics?
I don't think it will have much immediate effect. I think that the question is, how does Charles reign? If he decides to push the monarchy in an explicitly political direction, which a monarch is never under any circumstances supposed to do, then it would certainly lead to the monarchy's destruction, which obviously would have geopolitical ramifications. I think that he will do that? No, I think he'll shut up. But people already know where he stands, which is the problem. Not that they know where he stands on every issues, but on certain issues, particularly environmentalism, and that is something which is not good. It's certainly something that his mother never found herself in that situation. And William, who is Charles's heir, William has not gone down that road himself, which is very good. But I think that the geopolitical consequences will be very minor as long as Charles doesn't get political. If he gets political, there'll be major geopolitical consequences, and not of a good kind.
Yeah, I've already gotten a few phone calls about people's predictions as to what's going to happen. I've somebody who's a friend of ours is Australian, and he's told me about how he predicts that there's going to be a lot of instability within Australia when it comes to its association with the crown. So
there is the Australian Republican movement, which deserves, I guess you brought that up. People hear Republican in the U.S., and to them, conservatism is what springs to mind. Almost anywhere else in the U.S., it means leftism, like Spanish Republicans during the war against Franco. Not to say that I'm a fan of Franco, but the Spanish Republicans and Franco were two opposite sides that were absolutely neither of them were worth supporting. But then you have in, say, the Bahamas, a Republican movement to get rid of the crown, and it's more often than not associated with the left. And then in Australia, you have a Republican movement that's the same thing. Get rid of the British monarchy. It does pool people from both parties, but it tends to pool more from the left than the right. So, Republicanism, generally speaking, whenever you hear it anywhere, it's not going to lead to some sort of center-right civilized society. Typically, it's what people do because, as just happened in Barbados late last year, they get rid of the crown because they want a presidential system under a left-wing government, or at least left-leaning government, to more fully institute whatever that government wants.
Yeah, America is always confusing things sometimes. I will say that I love this country. I still do think that we are the greatest country in the world. But, when people think of football, that's really soccer in America's eyes. When, what do we think of the left? We think of the color blue. When right-wingers, when we think of the right, we think of the color red. It's always with us. It's flip-flopping. But most of the world drives on the right side of the road. So everybody else is doing something right. The UK is doing something very wrong. Hence why whenever I do visit the UK for the first time, I am not going to drive at all. I'm not taking a rental car. I'm going to have somebody drive me around. Because
if you go to the U.S. Well, if you go to the U.S. Virgin Islands, they also drive on the other side of the road relative to the rest of the U.S. So you don't even have to leave the U.S.
We got to set them straight. It's unacceptable. At least in Florida, they're driving on the right side of the road. Whenever I visited Florida, they're doing the right thing. Hopefully they don't get a little too back in touch with the monarchy, and then we want to drive on the left side of the road now.
Well, there is something to
the union.
Well, there is something to bring up because under Florida law, English common law is the law of the land by statute. It just has to comport with the Constitution of the U.S. and of Florida, and it's up to the 1770s. But English common law is still the law of Florida, and in the flag of Florida, there's the giant red X against white. And that is the X in the middle of the Union Jack, which is also red. It's called the St. Patrick's Saltire, even though the morons of the Florida Department of State call it the St. Andrew's Saltire, which is blue and white. So it's really interesting to see how this happened. But Florida still, if you drive through the state, plenty of places are named after people or locales from Britain. Florida had the highest population per capita of Anglo-Saxons up until World War II of anywhere in the U.S. And a lot of the peninsular area of the state where I live was settled by people either from Britain or a British background during the 1880s to the early 1900s.
Visit Florida today at florida.gov. No. I love the state of Florida, and I love hearing about Florida's history. I love especially learning about North American history that's not English or that's not British. So like Florida's Spanish history from the 1500s, for instance. I love that. I love hearing about Spain got to the Pacific in the 1600s, 15 and 1600s. I was watching a bunch of videos yesterday, just binging them when I was getting AFL work done about like Russian history in colonizing the Americas too. So whenever I hear facts such as this, but also hearing facts about Florida and English history when we've tried to move past that, it's always anything that's kind of out of the ordinary. I always like to try to take in as much as I can. Maybe that's why I'm such.
I, of course, don't want to move past it, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. So we got Jen.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. There's a bunch still, so I'm trying to get through them as fast as possible. But
please go ahead.
Up. Jenny says, obviously, when you go back in history, you see a lot of out there horror stories. But are there any patterns or events from your book that you could see happening today?
Oh, absolutely. The book it's one of history, but it's written for contemporary audiences, and I hope audiences during generations to come. I would say there are timeless lessons from the book, patterns that play out, whether it be people trying to impose an ideology or religion onto others, and the consequences of that, whether it be people trying to do their own thing and live in peace, and then there's someone who wants to do away with that. A very reasonable situation. I mean, I could get into a lot of things, but I don't want to take too long. But there are lots of things I'd say in my book that even though we're once talking about history, it does apply to the present day. So that's my perspective on it. It is, I keep saying it is a work of history, but I did write it for contemporary audiences, and I can only hope that will have relevance during generations to come.
That's why
relevance for generations to come. Yeah, I hope so. I hope they do.
So we got another question from Frank. Now that her ex-husband, I'm going to just slightly correct that and say son, is the King of England now, what do you think of the conspiracy theory that says an Illuminati ritual sacrifice by Canaanite royals is what killed Princess Diana?
I think it's about as crazy as any other, conspiracy theory that pops out in such an outlandish way. I don't think very much of it at all.
There you go. Get flying through the questions so well. But thank you, Frank, for the question. Flylord asks, what's this group about? Is it about supporting and respecting the people's right to vote? We're not against voting rights. We particularly don't get involved in most voting rights related issues. We haven't had to. But we are still a civil rights organization. So if there is any evidence of atheists being barred the right to vote, and people that support us being barred the right to vote, that's something we definitely do want to hear about. We are a 501c3 educational organization that cares about normalizing atheism, preserving free thinking, safeguarding secularism, and advancing individual liberty. And anything that falls in that arena, especially in our arena in the American culture wars, pops up, it's something we do want to hear about. So anything that comes into that category that you'd like to tell us about, or anybody that wants to tell us about, you can go to atheistsforliberty.org. There is a contact us page. You can contact us or tag me or message me on Twitter or social media. I take and respond to as many messages as I possibly can, at least when I'm able to see them in my feed. So I really, hopefully that's a good answer there. Another question from the same individual. Is there really such thing as a Christian nationalist? Unfortunately, yes. And like I said earlier in the stream, at least this is my perspective, I hate the fact that I even have to use the term because woke people love using that term now to describe people that they simply disagree with. I'm not even opposed to most Christians in the United States, most even Christians who call themselves conservatives in the United States. Most people and most Americans believe in freedom and the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendments. And I have my disagreements and issues with religion. We'll get into that as an organization through some of our content, but Christian nationalism is unfortunately a real phenomenon. It does exist. It's been, unfortunately, a partisan term, and I want to make sure that it's not a partisan term because there are actual people and movements that are doing some bad things and embracing the term Christian nationalism. So it is a real phenomenon. I don't know, Joseph, if you want to comment on that or not.
I actually lost sight of it for a moment. One moment, please. Oh, is there really? Well, of course there are. There's such thing as a Christian nationalist. It's anyone who wants, in my opinion, a theocracy for a certain country, and that theocracy is of Christian nature. Which is interesting because Christianity, if you read the New Testament, clearly is not nationalistic. It's something which is universally oriented. So I don't know how you fashion a nationalism out of that. It tries to do away with ancestry and heritage in favor of this all-powerful, supposedly, belief in Jesus as the Savior. So I think this is a particularly bad religious movement, Christianity, to base a nationalism on, but people still try to do it.
We got another question here. Do you think there is a potential for young Republicans to move to a more secular view on separation of church and state? I'll give my answer first, I guess. Yes, just blatant yes, full stop. I go to at least want to interact with the Republicans, not the Libertarians, not the anti-woke liberals and the centrists and whatever. We reach out to a lot of demographics at Atheist Liberty. We're not exclusively a conservative or right-wing organization, just to make that very clear. We're an atheist organization that just reaches out to other areas that woke groups won't. But when I go to young Republican events, either national YR events, state YR events and conferences, local YR meetups, I always am able to pluck out a few atheists that are in the room. So people who call themselves atheists, agnostics, non-religious at YR events, it's always growing. Same for college Republican chapters and GOP meetings and committee meetings. I always find atheists and agnostics that are there. That number might fluctuate depending on the year or administration that's in power, but gradually it always increases. And that's what I'm trying to state when Atheists for Liberty goes to CPAC, when we go to Freedom Fest, when we're going to be at LibertyCon, that in these sectors of American politics now, secularism is the future. The future of the liberty movement, the future of the conservative movement, the future of the YRs as an organization, YRNF, state YR chapters, local YR chapters, is a secular one. You want to actually have a leg against, say, the Democrats or the left or whatever. If I'm from that perspective, you want to make sure that you are smart enough to know of the demographic change that's happening in the country. Not to abandon your values, by the way, or your principles, but to be realistic. The United States is a secular nation. We never were a Christian theocracy. We were never from a governmental perspective of Christian nation. We might have had a Christian majority for many generations, and even now that's changing. But even with then, we are a secular country. We always have been, and that is the future branding that if young Republican groups make, they'll be able to get more than just that plucky few at their events. That's the future of young Republicans, and that's the future of young Republican organizations.
I think obviously the future of young Republicans, as with anything else in America, is overwhelmingly secular. Although I say that with the caveat that wokeness is here in a big way, and I do consider it to be a religion, but secular to the extent that's not based upon a belief in some supernatural deity.
Yeah, that's how the future. That's how the YRs are going to survive. I'm involved in YR politics. Personally speaking, I'm in my county's YR chapter. I'm part of the state YRs as well. I'm a member and supporter of theirs as well. I'm actually, as of the recording of this, tomorrow I'm going to a state YR convention. It is, gradually every time I go to these events, I find atheists and agnostics there. It's going to have to be secular in terms of its branding if it is to survive. And Atheists for Liberty and its growth and the demand for Atheists for Liberty to grow, thanks to all of you, is an example of just that. So, good question. Oh boy. All right, we'll do a few more questions for a few more minutes, and then we'll stop the show. So, what exactly is wokeism? There's a bunch of different episodes you can check out on the channel where guests explain what wokeism is, but I would state that it is an extreme form of progressivism that operates off of an intersectional hierarchy and blames the systems that it currently exists for creating a systemic culture of evil and racism, sexism, and bigotry, and judges you based on that and calls you out for any imperfections that you might state during the course of your lifetime in the public sphere, and then tries to ruin you in the process.
I think it's a very good definition. I'd say that wokeism is a religious belief system which holds that there is a hierarchy of victimhood, and which is to say that some victims are more important than others, and then obviously there is a set of oppressors as well. And it holds wokeism that in order to create a society worth living in, to save ourselves, to save the world, we have to stamp out these oppressors, even if oppression is necessary, even if the victims themselves become oppressors. And it's held as an article of faith that doing this will somehow make the world a better place. So it's very much a religion with messianic salvationist overtones, let alone undertones.
So this is a different question, not a Republican Party one, but rather a Libertarian Party one. Christopher Baker asked, what does Cotto think about the changes in the Libertarian Party? I don't know if you pay attention to LP politics.
It's in my periphery. I know that the Mises caucus has taken over there, and they're promoting a more sort of paleo-libertarian vision than the Johnson Weld. The wokeism wasn't. It was around then in 2016. It wasn't what it is now, but the Johnson Weld sort of proto-woke adjacent vision, basically in the minority. And the paleo-libertarians are interesting because I think what they're really doing is functioning as a pressure group upon the Republican Party, which is how they'd be most effective, practically speaking.
We got another, I guess, a comment or a demand for you. First thing, this is for, I guess, King Charles. First thing Charles needs to call out is mass immigration and the Indian occupation of their government and upper class. I don't know how big of an issue this is, or if this is an issue at all, or if this is just a provocative comment.
I don't think there's an Indian occupation. The occupation that they have to worry about in the UK is nothing to do with Hindu Indians or Sikh Indians. It's a very different sort of occupation from a purportedly peaceful religion. But what I will what I will say is that Charles cannot call out anything politically if he wants the crowd to remain intact. He has to basically shove his opinions and act in as nonpartisan a fashion as possible to maintain order in the UK.
Hey, Hannah. So let's see what else we got. Let's see. Any more comments here? Okay, last one. Do I search YouTube for videos on what wokeism is and that AFL made? No, you can actually go onto the channel here right now, Atheists for Liberty. The channel with our logo should be underneath here right now, at least where I'm at on your screen at this moment. You click on that and you'll see all of our comments, not all of our comments, all of our video content that you can watch. We are expanding this streaming series and we're going to be having it every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, everybody. Be sure to follow us on social media. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistforliberty. Become a member. Go on our homepage at atheistforliberty.org. Pay the $12 or upgrade your membership. We give out signed copies of books by our board of advisors. We're going to be giving out lapel pins soon to members of certain tiers, stickers that you can put on laptops and cars, and various other perks and benefits like giving shout outs on the channel. Like I said, our member of the week is Brian. Brian Gray. Be like Brian and become a member at atheistforliberty.org today and support us and support our mission. Subscribe to our channel Tune in next week at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Get involved in what we're doing. We're now expanding to in-person meetups and events. So we just had our first meetup in Texas in the DFW area. We're going to be having our next regional meetup in New York City. So for all of our downstate New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey members and supporters on meetup.com, because we have groups on Meetup too, come join us and celebrate with us and support what we do. Anything you want to say, Joseph?
Yes, that somebody brought up in the chat, I noticed, saying that Portugal is such a wonderful place to live relative to the US. Portugal has some of the lowest wages of any place in Europe. It experiences massive brain drain. It has to attract wealthy people from across the world through its golden visa program. And that's causing a lot of problems among people in Portugal because the influx of foreigners are raising the prices of real estate in Portugal to such a degree that the native Portuguese cannot afford to live as they used to live. And these folks were making salaries which are, a shadow of what you get in the US. So Portugal is not some panacea. It has much better, much saner drug laws than the US does, without question. But and it's not a bad country. I'm not dissing Portugal at all. It has some of the nicest people you're going to find anywhere. But the country does have a very bad economic situation. It has for some time. And if your average American were to go to Portugal, and if that American wanted to have a standard of living that they would find, recognizable, they would have to have, which is what they do have, a job elsewhere. They're digital nomads, and they just live in Portugal, take advantage of the lower cost of living, something that looks like California at about a third of the price. But if once you say I'm going to go to Portugal and make a living there, and it's better than where I'm from in the U.S., Canada, the UK. I'm not a big fan of the U.S., Canada, or the UK. The situations they're in right now, I'm not defending them, but Portugal is definitely not a panacea. It's something, I'm not Portuguese, but it's something that I happen to know quite a bit about, and they're having big problems in Portugal now because of all of these people have come in and jacked up the prices. And like I said, the situation there is so dire that they have to have this golden visa program that allows either wealthy or just fairly well-to-do Westerners to buy their way into Portugal to get permanent residency and eventually citizenship. So yeah, Portugal is not a place that I think most people want to live unless they had an income independent of the country.
All right. And I think that's a good place to end it there. For anybody that wants to continue this discussion after the show, become a member at atheistfreely.org today. We have people standing by to respond to your email, give you the link to our Discord server and our Facebook group for you to join in on the after chat. I'm going to be popping in there in a few minutes. So we're going to continue to do what is right in this new age of reason. We are going to be having these streams every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific to give you all more amazing content and to really live up to us being an amazing educational nonprofit organization that fights for free speech, free thinking, freedom for all. Check out the links for Joseph Ford Cotto in the description below, his Amazon book link. Check out and buy Eye for an Eye. Already, we had a member that just purchased one while this stream has been going on live. Do this, and also make Atheists for Liberty the charity of your choice on Amazon Smile so we can get a few of the proceeds and continue to support us, everybody. And tune in next week at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Next week's guest is going to be Devin Tracy, also known as Atheism is Unstoppable AIU. Joseph Ford Cotto, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
It's a really pleasure to have been on here, to have chatted with you, Thomas, and to have addressed the questions from the audience. It was a great discussion. I hope to be back on in the future. And obviously, I hope to see you on Cotto Gottfried.
I'm looking forward to it. See you all next week, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and happy fall.